Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the We're Not Stumped podcast. I'm your host, Mike Bolin, and today is Thursday, which is usually news and notes, but today I guess I do have some news, and it's unfortunate news. I'm going to report the passing of two-time We're Not Stumped guest, Eric Gabriel. He passed away on March 8th, a few days ago. His daughter reached out to me to let me know. Unfortunately, Dr. Eric Gabriel, PhD, was diagnosed with cancer upwards of 6 months ago, right around there. And again, he unfortunately passed away less than a week ago. You know, when you do a podcast, especially this type of podcast where people are sharing stories about themselves, that it's some of the toughest days, weeks, months of their lives. And I'm close with everyone that have been on this podcast. I admire them and just always have gotten along with everyone that's been on this podcast. But just like everything in life, sometimes you build a special connection with people. And Eric, for me, was one of those people. There's been a lot of them on this podcast. Dan Moses, Jennifer JJ Johns. I mean, the list goes on, but Eric was certainly one of those. We would talk a lot. I found out about Eric through a article in Amplitude magazine. Some things about Eric. He got his doctorate when he was a bilateral above knee amputee. Got it from GCU, which I'm in Arizona, and my daughter actually got her master's at GCU. There was some special connections between Eric and I that I'll get into in just a second. But for those of you that don't know Eric, he was on twice, like I said. He was on Season 3, Episode 1, and Season 4, Episode 3. One of the things I always do on the podcast, if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, is I have a segment I call In Your Own Words, where I allow the guest to introduce themselves and tell their own story, because they're going to do a much better job than I am. I do as much research as I can, but no one is going to know their story and how they want to deliver it better than the guest. So with that said, I would like to allow Eric from Season 3, Episode 1 to introduce himself.
Oh, Mike, I thank you and your audience for having me. It's quite an honor. I'm thrilled to be here. So thank you all.
Well, it's been great getting to know you, because we're fortunate. We've been able to have a lot of conversations, just you and I, and it's so fun to get to know you. But since the audience doesn't know you, and we always start the We're Not Stumped podcast with a segment we call In Your Own Words, I'd love to hear your story.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Levittown, Long Island, New York. Sports was always a big part of my life. All through high school, I played 3 sports a year, football, basketball, baseball. But my love was baseball. I loved baseball. And I had some opportunities in college after high school, but because of some troubles at home, I went my own way. And it was one of those typical sayings, I'll go to college next year. Yeah. And next year never comes, you know. So I started a job in project management, and it led on to a career for 30 years as a project manager. I worked on 2 nuclear power stations at Shoreham, Long Island, New York, and Perry, Ohio. And then a good part of my career was working on FAA air route traffic control centers across the country. During that tenure, I also went to school and college at night. That's when I went to college at night, no baseball. But in the beginning, because I missed baseball so much, I took up softball. And it started out in bar leagues, and I was noticed by a few teams and sponsors, and I moved up quickly. And then I started to play on traveling softball teams.
Oh, wow.
And between Long Island leagues and traveling every other weekend, we averaged about 150 games a season, and while still having a full-time job. So it was busy. And I was the type of ball player. I was not shy about running into walls and garbage cans and sliding head first. And that's where really the trouble started. After I suffered my first knee operation, I was actually afraid to slide feet first because I was afraid I was going to screw up my knee. So I kind of mimicked the Pete Rose head first slide.
Yeah.
And I was a big guy back then. I was 6'5". I went around 260. And picture a guy running full speed and then launching himself forward and landing on the ground, sliding. My knees took a big brunt of those impacts, if you can imagine, over 18 years. So when my career did end after 18 years, I was haunted, or reality came from what my father said. He goes, the way you're throwing your body around the field, you're going to pay for this when you get older. And like any young guy, I said, yeah, what do dads know? Well, my dad knew right. After I retired, the injuries caught up with me. And like you had mentioned, I'm 66 now, and I've had over 63 orthopedic operations,
Wow.
including having my legs taken off.
Eric and I had a connection that I wasn't aware of from many years ago. And he surprised me with that connection on the first episode, on season 3, episode 1. He surprised me with a connection I wasn't aware of that we had. So here's Eric telling me about our connection in his own words.
And you know what I want to tell the rest of the audience, which they don't know? In 1974, I was a junior in high school. And one Friday night, I was with my high school sweetheart sitting in the back row of the Levittown movie theater. And I was trying to get her attention, on this football player in school. And all she can do, and I was competing with this young movie star on the big screen who was missing a hand, had a prosthetic. He was getting the sympathy. He was a cute little boy. Plus, he was getting the sympathy, oohs and ahs from the girls in the audience. So I had no chance with this high school sweetheart. And last week, I get a phone call from that budding superstar of the big screen. That was you, Mike.
Yeah.
In the trial of Billy Jack, making your cinematic debut,
and finale in the same movie.
Yeah, and you ruined my Friday night. That was a finale for me. So
that is so funny for you to bring up. Gosh,
believe it or not, this is not almost 50 years to the day when you called. Yeah. And I said, well, what is the ironic twist to this?
Yeah. Yes, I was 8 years old when I was in that movie, and thank you for bringing it up. It's funny, I do let people know about it, but I also let them know that if they do want to watch that movie, they say, oh, you're in the movie, I got to see it. It's like, you're not going to get that 3 hours back. You're not going to get that back in your life. But it was a great experience, and just to be clear with everyone, Mr. Laughlin, as I used to call him, Tom Laughlin, Billy Jack, and his daughter, who I spent most of my scenes with, her name, she played Carol, TC, Teresa Kelly now, Laughlin. Fantastic people.
Right.
I mean, they're just, great family.
To say Eric was a fighter is very much an understatement. When he found out he had cancer, he wanted to give back. And he was in the process of creating something called Gabriel's Row. One of his favorite expressions or sayings of all time came from Rocky VI, or Rocky Balboa, in 2006. It's not how hard you get hit, it's how hard you get hit, knocked down, and get back up. And of course, I'm paraphrasing. Eric knew that. That's the type of person he was. Like I said, tougher than shit. And he was a fighter. He was going to fight cancer till, unfortunately, the very end. But he wanted to give back. And it was his dream to give back. And developing Gabriel's Row was his very last goal in his life. He asked me to help him with that. My role in Gabriel's Row was to create a video, a teaser video, a mini documentary to introduce people to Eric and let him know what he was working towards and what he's worked through in his life. So if you're just listening to this podcast, there might be some redundant things in this excerpt that I'm going to play right now. But I would urge you to get on YouTube and watch the video, this part of the video, because this is what he told me when I started working on this, and I would send him my edits. And this is kind of a rough cut. I was going to redo the voiceovers and things like that. And the video was supposed to end with him talking about Gabriel's Row, what it means to him, and how people can get involved. The dates, the actual Gabriel's Row is unfortunately still up in the air now because of the unfortunate events that occurred. So there really technically isn't an ending to this. I will put an ending that'll at least make it an ending, if that makes sense. But what I want to read to you is something, you know, when I was working on this video for him, he was already in the hospital. It was unfortunately about 6 weeks ago, because we would call each other quite a bit. I call his house and he never called back. I'm like, oh boy, I was a little nervous at that point. But he was rushed to the hospital and unfortunately never made it out of the hospital. But I was able to call him a few times. I talked to him just a couple weeks ago. But when we were going over the video, I sent him the link. It is listed as unlisted in YouTube, and he was able to view it. And here's what he wrote me. Good morning, Mike. You know, I haven't smiled in a long time, and the tears have been an everyday event in between the waterfalls, looking up and cursing at the gods. You have changed that with your intro to my documentary. My friend, you have missed your calling. Home run, without a doubt. You got me to smile through that downpour of happy tears. You, me, we're going to crush this thing. What a fantastic start. Tell me what to do, write, prepare, whatever you need. You have me so excited. But I have to tell you, it's tough seeing myself with 2 legs. But we will kill it with the no-leg accomplishments. You got me walking on cloud 9, which is tough to do. It's a funny guy. And I want to very much now proceed. I cannot say thank you enough and how impressed I am with your hard work. Thank you, Michael. He called me Michael. Eric. It's such an honor to enable a happy time for people that aren't going through it, through happy times. So with that said, here is the mini documentary of Eric.
For the love of the game. Just about all of us have heard that expression. It is often associated with the idea of participating in a sport or activity purely for the passion, joy, and internal motivation. For the love of the game is not about external rewards like fame or money. As Dr. Eric Gabriel gets ready for the biggest challenge of his life, a new adventure begins to take shape. His challenge? Cancer. His adventure? Gabriel's Row, a passion project dedicated to raising funds for cancer research. But Dr. Gabriel will partake in this adventure much differently than the others who have volunteered to help with his cause. He will be rowing without legs that he used to have, the legs that helped him excel in softball for almost 30 years. In his prime, he was known for his intense, gritty, and relentless playing style that epitomized his love for softball. He played every game as if it were his last. And this attitude, you better bet he will take it to Gabriel's Row. Legs be damned. But the journey to start this row, to at one time be a mountain of a man standing 6 feet 5 inches tall and weighing 260 pounds, to a gentleman without legs fighting cancer, well, that's as much a part of Gabriel's Row as the actual event itself.
I grew up on Levittown, Long Island, New York. Sports was always a big part of my life.
All through high school, I played 3 sports a year, football, basketball, baseball. But my love was baseball. I loved baseball. And I had some opportunities in college after high school, but because of some troubles at home, I went my own way. And it was one of those typical sayings, I'll go to college next year. And next year never comes, you know. So I started a job in project management, and it led on to a career for 30 years as a project manager. I worked on 2 nuclear power stations at Shoreham, Long Island, New York, and Perry, Ohio. And then a good part of my career was working on FAA air route traffic control centers across the country. During that tenure, I also went to school and college at night. In the beginning, because I missed baseball so much, I took up softball. And it started out in bar leagues, and I was noticed by a few teams and sponsors, and I moved up quickly. And then I started to play on traveling softball teams. And between Long Island leagues and traveling every other weekend, we average about 150 games a season. And I was the type of ball player. I was not shy about running into walls and garbage cans and sliding head first. And that's where really the trouble started. After I suffered my first knee operation, I was actually afraid to slide feet first. I was a big guy back then. I was 6'5". I went around 260. And picture a guy running full speed and then launching himself forward and landing on the ground, sliding. My knees took a big brunt of those impacts, if you can imagine, over 18 years. So when my career did end after 18 years, I was haunted, or reality came from what my father said. He goes, the way you're throwing your body around the field, you're going to pay for this when you get older. And like any young guy, I said, yeah, you know, what do dads know? Well, my dad knew right.
His words were prophetic. What he predicted began to become true as Eric started to have troubles with his right knee.
All my injuries and stuff were due to the way I played ball, but I wouldn't change a thing. There we go. And then into the house we go. I'm embarrassed to say that I've had 63 orthopedic operations from playing ball. When I lost my first leg, people would say, you know, how you holding up? I would say, hey, it could be a lot worse. I could be missing 2 legs. Well, ironically, I'm missing 2 legs now, so I don't use that phrase anymore. Good point. My right leg, I had 22 knee operations, and then finally an artificial knee. Over 6 months, that artificial knee got infected. Well, I had lymphedema in my other leg, my good leg, and my leg filled up with fluid. So I woke up Monday morning with a temperature. Friday, my leg was gone. It happened that fast. It was me and a bottle of Jack Daniels and a computer, and I said, I'm gonna find out what I can do athletically wise. So I come across this rowing machine called an erg. You sit on it, you pull it with your upper body, and I said, I can do that. And then I find the Paralympic website, and then I see rowing. I said, that's cool, that's what I'm gonna do. The head coach from the Paralympic team calls, and they invite me to Oklahoma City to actually row on the water to try out for the Paralympic team. I said, holy cow, this could come true. Almost a year after my leg amputation, I was in a boat with 7 other gentlemen. The guy in the front of the boat was completely blind. The guy behind him missing an arm, missing a hand, I'm missing a leg, a foot, and so on. And we're rowing down the Oklahoma River. It was the most surreal thing in the world.
Surreal. As defined by the Cambridge Dictionary, surreal is strange, not seeming real, like a dream. At this exact moment of his life, he had another dream, to become Dr. Eric Gabriel. And if you're sensing a trend with this story, that the impossible just may be possible, you may already know that a bilateral above-knee amputee achieved his goal.